Did Donald Trump really mess up this time? That's the question we're asking in this video, because now the US-Israeli campaign has entered its fifth consecutive day and is rapidly turning into one of the most dangerous conflicts the Middle East has seen in the last several decades. And it began, from what we understood, as coordinated strikes that would take place in Iran, but now it's a multi-front regional conflict involving, more than a dozen countries. And there are missile exchanges, there are drone attacks, there are growing civilian casualties, there's concern about business, there's concern about the stock markets, and there's diplomatic fallout across the world. Donald Trump is losing support, not just globally, but also back home. And in these 5 days, we're not seeing any real sign of any de-escalation. So has the United States miscalculated its move against Iran? If we were to frame that question a little better, because not all of the United States decided to do this. In fact, Donald Trump and the rest of his administration didn't even seek permission back home before they made this decision. So the question should say, has Donald Trump miscalculated his move against Iran? Now, that's the question we're asking. Remember, like, share, subscribe, and sign up for our membership as well. Also, before we get to the 4 or 5 reasons why I believe Donald Trump has miscalculated, let me give you an update of everything that has happened in the last 24 hours since we last spoke on this front, because if I don't tell you, who's going to tell you? This is all of the confirmed information that we have. Israel has significantly expanded its military operations inside of Iran. It's targeted missile launchers, weapon facilities, its military infrastructure across the country. Joint US-Israeli strikes have hit western Tehran. Video footage shows large plumes of smoke rising over the Iranian capital. The Iranian local media talks about the fact that hospitals have been hit. We know a school was already hit where a large number of small children died. There are a lot of civilian infrastructure is being targeted by US and Israel inside of Iran. The most significant target has been a nuclear facility, one of the central pillars of Iran's nuclear program. Iranian media reported that the site was damaged, but there's no radioactive leakage reported so far. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has confirmed fighter jets are flying over Iranian territory, including Tehran, and he said Israel will continue to strike the country with force. Iran, meanwhile, has launched one of the largest retaliatory barrages in history, in its own history. According to US Admiral Brad Cooper, Iran has fired more than 500 ballistic missiles and launched over 2,000 drones since this conflict began 5 days ago. These attacks have targeted Israel directly, but also expanded to targets across the Gulf. As you know, the casualties, according to Iranian officials, 1,000 people have been killed in Iran. More than 1,000 people. 50 people have been killed in Lebanon, where Israeli strikes have hit Hezbollah targets. In Israel, 11 people have died, and most of the missiles have been intercepted by their air defense system. This war, if we are starting to call it a war now, is begun to claim American lives. And this is a key part to the conversation that we are having right now. The Pentagon has confirmed 6 soldiers, 6 US service members have been killed, including the 4 who died in the drone strike in Kuwait. One of the most devastating incidents, obviously, like I mentioned earlier, was the attack on the Iranian primary girls' school, in which 165 schoolgirls between the ages of 7 and 12 died. 165 tiny little coffins and staff were killed in that school attack, and there was a large funeral ceremony held by Iran in the last 24 hours, confirmed to be one of the deadliest incidents in this war so far. Across the Gulf, as we know this has been spreading, Iran has warned that it will target, quote unquote, all economic centers in the region if US-Israeli attacks continue. So Iran is making it very clear what it plans to do. In Saudi Arabia, 2 drones struck the US embassy in Riyadh, causing minor damage, but, sovereign territory. UAE, a drone struck the parking lot of the US consulate in Dubai, starting a small fire that was then put out. US officials say all personnel are accounted for, no one is hurt. The Dubai government later confirmed that there was that the fire was brought under control. In Qatar, air defense systems intercepted projectiles over Doha. In Oman, the US embassy in Muscat instructed American citizens to shelter in one place. Commercial vessel activity, one commercial vessel was also struck by an unknown projectile in Fujairah in the UAE, according to the UK Maritime Trade Operations Security Tracker. Widening attacks have also forced the United States to shut down several of its embassies across the region, including Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Lebanon. US State Department has advised Americans, and this is interesting, the US State Department has advised Americans to leave the 14 countries across the Middle East immediately, citing security risks. 14 countries, so all over the Gulf, they've told them to leave. But how? Because airspaces are closed across the whole region, which means that you can't fly out. And your government is telling you to actually exit as quickly as you can. How are you supposed to exit if you can't fly out at this point? There's been no plan offered by the State Department at all as to what they're supposed to be doing. In fact, and this comes up a little later, in Israel, the American embassies have asked people to leave however they choose to do so, because again, that airspace is closed as well. We do, of course, know that Iran's allies in Hezbollah have received Israeli rockets. In the last 24 hours, 50 people have been killed and 35 wounded. Iran is now preparing to elect a new supreme leader to fill that power vacuum. The Assembly of Experts are close to naming a successor, but we also know that Israeli Defense Minister has said whoever becomes Iran's next supreme leader will also be target for elimination. So it's by far the most dangerous job in the world right now. But let's come back to the question we were asking to begin with, and that's everything that's happened in the last 24 hours. Did the United States, or did Donald Trump, woefully miscalculate his moves domestically and internationally, diplomatically and militarily, when he decided to join Israel in these airstrikes in Iran, right? So this is what we're looking at. First, Iran's regime, like I pointed out to you, has not collapsed. So if the aim was in fact regime change, well, you've not achieved that aim. And what are you going to have to do to achieve that aim? Because remember, if we look back, zoom back a little bit, there were airstrikes last year. There was a war between Israel and Iran, which obviously America supported, because America supports everything that Israel does. We know that. After which there were protests and the government did not fall. And now there is this assassination that has taken place. The government has not fallen. How many more assassinations are you going to have to do? How many more airstrikes will you have to do in order to ensure a regime change? So despite losing that supreme leader and several top military figures, Iranian government continues to function and they're filling that vacuum. So we don't know what your aim is, and you've not achieved any of those. Military bases, or the US military bases across the Middle East, are now under attack. As we know, Iran is hitting the Gulf, but not civilian establishment, but American installations and diplomatic facilities across the Gulf. And that is making people very nervous. War remains, the aims of the war remains unclear. And here is where there's a big problem. Within the Trump administration, there are different sort of arguments that are being put forth on why they started this to begin with. Now, Donald Trump first said he ordered the attacks because he believed Iran was going to strike first. So we thought they were going to hit us, so we hit them first. His explanation now contradicts statements made by his own administration. So his Secretary of State, Mark Rubio, so for them, Secretary of State is sort of like a finance minister. Sort of like a foreign minister, beg your pardon. He said that the United States launched an attack because it expected Iran would retaliate against planned Israeli strikes, and Washington wanted to act preemptively. So what Rubio is saying is that Israel was planning on attacking Iran, and we knew that Iran would retaliate. So we attacked Iran before Israel attacked Iran, in order to foil the retaliation. I hope Mark Rubio understands what he says, because nobody else has really figured that out. And then Trump, of course, gave a completely different sort of explanation, where he said Iran was going to attack first, and so we attacked them before they attacked us. And, these things are all contrary to each other, and the shifting explanations have brought in a lot of criticism, not just from the opposition or the Democrats, but also internally from Trump's political allies. I'll give you an example. Megyn Kelly and Matt Walsh, who are conservative commentators, so basically, unka godi media, have questioned whether the United States is now fighting Israel's war. And there's a lot of growing political backlash within the country because the US Senate is now preparing a vote on what they call a war powers resolution led by Senator Tim Kaine, who is supported by several Democrats and a few Republicans. They're basically saying that it would require Congress to approve any further military action. So what they could do if they vote against it, is they could cut off the pipe for Donald Trump completely, and he will not have access. He will not, as commander-in-chief, be able to order any more military action in Iran. Now, lawmakers such as the Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer have warned that wars without clear objectives, and we've pointed out that this one does not have a clear objective, can become bigger, bloodier, and longer, while others say Congress must reclaim its constitutional authority over decisions of war and peace. Now, like I told you yesterday, based on the American Constitution, their president is the commander-in-chief, and he is allowed to basically give the order for smaller actions, military actions that are necessary in emergency. But when it is a larger war, they have to seek congressional permission, which he has not done. Now, prominent Democratic figures have also voiced concern. Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has described the conflict as an unnecessary war that will risk the lives of American service members. At a press briefing, we also had Gavin Newsom, who's being sort of portrayed by the Democrats as their next candidate for the next presidential elections. He's from California. He asked why the United States is fighting Israel's war. He also asked officials to explain clearly whether it was American bombs or Israeli bombs that were used to kill children in Iran. And he described the conflict as illegal and an irrational attack that risks the United States in this entire space. Senator Rand Paul, who is a Republican, which means he's on Trump's side, have supported a vote, and they're arguing that the Constitution gives Congress, not the president, the power to decide whether or not America goes to war. Just to focus a little bit on this idea of Israel's war, right? So while America is battling all of these voices domestically, Israeli leaders are not helping Donald Trump's case in any way. They're actually using very forceful language. So Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has suggested the strikes will open the door for Iranian people to overthrow their government. And Israel's defense minister has said, like I told you, that the next supreme leader will also become a target for elimination. So the debate has now, obviously, after Mark Rubio then said that Israel was planning on attacking and then Iran would have retaliated, so we attacked first, means that are you on Israel's timeline now? Is Israel deciding who attacks whom? Does Israel make the plan and does US follow? And these comments have obviously brought a lot of criticism from both Democrats and from Republicans and conservative voices, asking whether this is something that serves the interest of America in any way at all. Was America ever at risk? Remember, at the UN at one point, America suggested that Iran was going to assassinate Trump. So you assassinated their leader. So there's a lot of confusion. And what's also happening here is the allies that America would have normally taken for granted, they can't take for granted anymore. Because remember, Donald Trump has not treated the European Union or the various European countries and allies very well. So let's see what has happened there. Europe is not fully backing the US. Spain's Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, has called the attacks unjustified and dangerous military intervention. Madrid has refused to allow the United States to use bases in southern Spain for the operation. And Trump responded, threatening to cut off Spain from trade, saying we will not trade with Spain. But that doesn't make any sense because Spain is part of the European Union, and the European Union negotiated a trade deal with America that covers all of its members. So Spain is not a separate entity that you can just cut off. Well, Sanchez did not take that line down. He gave another televised address where he said the position of the government of Spain can be summed up in 4 words. He says no to war. The other more surprising, interesting thing was the United Kingdom that has always, I mean, from the days of Tony Blair, always stood really close to the US to a point where you can't even see the United Kingdom in the US shadow. But Prime Minister Keir Starmer initially refused to allow US warplanes, allow the US warplanes to use British bases, citing a clear lack of legal justification and other concerns, repeating the mistakes of the 2003 Iraq War. Trump, of course, publicly criticized Starmer by saying that this is not Winston Churchill we are dealing with. So Trump did not, I mean, spent the last 1 year turning his best friends into new enemies. And now he was expecting that all of these people will just show up for him, no questions asked. And that support seems to be waning. The other big problem for Trump is just simply the cost of this war. The financial cost of the conflict. I want to give you, according to one intelligence estimate, Iran has already damaged $2 billion worth of American military assets. I'll give you a breakup, right? So the early warning radar system at the airbase in Qatar that was destroyed, $1.1 billion. 5 F-15s that were taken down by mistake by Kuwait, plus satellite communications infrastructure on the US 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain that was taken down, a missile defense radar component in the UAE worth about $500 million. Altogether, they've lost about $2 billion worth of assets in the last 5 days. That is not a small number. It's not going to be an easy number for him to play down domestically. Similarly, according to Brown University's 2025 Cost of War report, since the 7th of October 2023, US has given Israel, and this was Biden also, but it's going to add up because it's all coming out of the same kitty. Now, US had provided Israel with $21.7 billion in military aid. Apart from that, another about $12 billion to support it in Yemen, Iran, and the wider Middle East. It brings the total spending of the US close to $33.7 billion and counting. So obviously, this is not great for the US. According to other reports, US may have spent roughly $700 to nearly $800 million during the first 24 hours of Operation Epic Fury, which is what Donald Trump has called it, which includes basically pre-strike military buildup, repositioning aircraft, deploying more than a dozen naval vessels, mobilizing all of their regional assets, and all of that has a cost that they're going to have to justify domestically. Iran also, remember, has a stranglehold right now on the Strait of Hormuz, which means it is not allowing oil tankers to go through. So the price of crude has gone up to $84 a barrel. That's a 15% bump up in the last 5 days. Global stock markets are getting hammered. They're worried that oil prices may grind down. And remember, Trump has just spent a lot of energy getting everybody to drop Russian oil. And now he's managed to choke the Gulf oil. And if people run out of oil, they're going to go back to Russia. I mean, India normally has about 20-25 days of crude in reserve because there are ships constantly coming. So we can hold off for about 25 days. We understand China's reserve tends to be a little deeper than that. Ours is about 25 days. Not every country will have that kind of reserve. Remember, we also refine crude and create petroleum products that we export to other countries. So that refinery ability that we have will give us a deeper holding as to how much fuel we have in reserve. So before our fuel prices start to climb up, we have some room. And I'll do a separate story on the margin that the Indian government tends to keep and, what that will mean for us as citizens. But effectively, America loves cheap oil, and this is going to hurt America. There are also, this is all of the information that we've got right now from the hard numbers. There is also the other diplomatic circles of analysts and some unconfirmed reports that are coming in that I also want to put before you about what's actually going on the ground. Now, there's one set of analysts, military analysts, who say that Tehran appears to be launching a large number of cheap drones, older missiles, and possibly decoy targets in order to force Israel and US to fire expensive interceptor missiles. So effectively, there's economics in this strategy. Iran's drones may cost $1,000 or $10,000, whereas the interceptor missile that is being fired to take it down, whether that's the Patriot or David Sling or other defense systems, costs hundreds of thousands or maybe even $1 million each. So repeatedly triggering those defenses, Iran is potentially draining interceptor stockpiles and stretching the radar and launch systems and creating openings to be able to keep it going for longer and exhausting its opponent. So there's no confirmed evidence that they are only sort of shooting decoys, but they may be using cheaper weapons or possibly dummy targets with real missiles in order to overwhelm and economically sort of frustrate the sophisticated air defense networks. Now, there's another angle to this. The Gulf states, who are sort of squashed in the middle of all of this, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman, these guys like safety, they like stability. Now, if you're on social media, and I know you are, you've seen all of those videos of the royalty and the sort of leadership of the UAE walking the malls and sitting down with people without any security, drinking coffee, effectively assuring people that everything is okay, that you are safe, there is nothing to worry about. Because these economies depend on secure oil exports, on safe shipping routes, and being seen as reliable global business hubs and investments. Now, all of that is under threat by what is happening right now. It's a rough estimate that says Dubai loses about $1 million every minute the airports don't work. The damage could exceed $5 billion already. Iran is trying to exploit this vulnerability by expanding the attacks across the Gulf, targeting only the US installations and diplomatic, so only the high commissions, the consulates of the US or their military facilities. What they're saying is that the Gulf countries will pay an economic and a security price because shipping has been disrupted, infrastructure is being damaged, and they're hoping maybe that the Gulf will force America to call for a ceasefire because none of them want this. I mean, yes, they are powerful, rich countries, but they're powerful, rich countries based on the idea of stability and safety. None of them would want this to go any further than it already has. Then, of course, there is the analysis on the ground that says that by killing Iran's supreme leader, US unintentionally created a martyr figure. There is a Shiite political tradition of martyrdom, which carries tremendous symbolic power, where a leader who's been killed by a foreign power actually is not a victim, but is seen as someone who sacrificed themselves for the nation and for Islam. So they become a martyr, they become shaheed. And Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is being held as a martyr, as being portrayed as a champion. And there are large funeral ceremonies, there are large public rallies, and it's sort of building anger against the US and Israel. And situations like this build a sort of rally around the flag effect. So even citizens who would have hated their local government or would have been critical of their local government actually temporarily unite against that external enemy because this was a very senior citizen in his 80s. In fact, there are some analysts who said, could America have just waited? I mean, he was already in his 80s. Was there a need to do this? But what domestically people are going to see it as, this was an elderly cleric leader who has sacrificed himself. This was cruel, this was unnecessary, and it's possibly going to, of course, rally a lot of support domestically. It's going to mobilize people behind the Iranian government, which might not have happened if the US had not done what it had done. And of course, there are some indications saying that Iran was perhaps better prepared for the type of war that is unfolding than the US estimated. Because from Iran's point of view, US and Israel have been cooking this now for a while. And it's constantly been on alert that something like this is going to happen. So it's got large stockpiles of ballistic missiles, it's got hundreds of drones, it's got cyber facilities, it's got a network of allied militia across the region between the Hezbollah and, of course, Hamas has been decimated, but there are groups in Iraq and Syria and Yemen still. And all of these tools allow them basically to stretch it out, to frustrate their enemy, and to basically try and extend it for as long as they can until America can no longer hold on. Iran appears to have anticipated that its leadership and military command as well could be targeted, which is why they had a system in place where the power shifted quickly to their clerical body assembly of experts, and they're now appointing a new supreme leader. So institutional resilience also has played in, and there's no political collapse. So United States and Israel are holding, they still have, of course, technology, intelligence, conventional military power, but are they really prepared for the long, messy regional conflict rather than a short, decisive boom boom war that they may have been expecting? So it does seem like Tehran can't immediately be written off, that it might be prepared at this point to stretch out the conflict, to raise the cost, to widen the battlefield in order to make things uncomfortable for Donald Trump. For Donald Trump, this is finally going to wind down to how long it lasts and how much it escalates, because we know that long conflicts in this manner have not done well for the US, and historically they erode public support. Domestically, people do not like it on both sides of the aisle. People do not like it. So we have debates in Congress, we have division among Trump's own base, criticism from the Democrats and from social commentators who normally like Trump. If the American casualties rise, or oil prices surge even further, or the war expands even further, and the cost, simply in dollars adds up to too much, Trump will have to start answering questions. And we know he doesn't like being asked questions at all. So we're going to have to see how the Americans actually react to what is happening.